Have you ever seen the trajectory of paradox, abundance versus scarcity, or plenty versus poor? Africa is naturally rich, yet millions of its people were poor and forced to suffer. Is it because of being cursed or due to policy deficiency of Western intervention? Or its resources were a curse for the continent? Hello and welcome to ETV World. In this program, we will see how aid hampers Africa's development and prosperity. Do stay with us. Africa, by many Western literature, is known as under, poor, dark, and a continent of violence and conflict. Furthermore, a continent naturally rich, but failed to enrich its people. Bearing this notion in mind, donors use aid as carrot and stick approach to execute their political interests at the expense of the weak, poor, and destitute African people, providing aid and donation for years. Most developed nations need to see weak and puppet leaders in developing nations. Many critics oftentimes recommend many African leaders to exploit their natural resources thoroughly by resetting and freeing up the mindset of their people from obsession to aid money, as there is no free lunch in life. Foreign donors, whatever aid and donation they offer to developing nations, they don't do it with a mere sense of charity or altruism. Rather, they use it as a tool to dictate their social, economic, and political direction to these nations that they should take. Understanding such Western world's anti-development effort to developing nations, many scholars are repeatedly calling on leaders of third world countries to come up with some counter strategies. One of African old-time genius and who was taught in various reputable universities, including at Harvard School of Economics, Zambian economist Dr. Dambisa Moyo, in her bestseller book entitled Dead Aid, describes aid as a cancer. Moyo said, in the past 50 years, more than $1 trillion in development-related aid has been transferred from rich countries to Africa. She asks, has this assistance improved the life of Africans? She answers no. According to Center for Global Development report of 2013, the total amount of aid given to Africa was more than $2.6 trillion. Why did it fail to uplift Africa from the sea of poverty? The Paris Declaration, the Lagos Plan of Action, or others, as compared to that of Marshall Plan for EU countries post-World War II. What Africans lost as a result of it is by far worse than what they got. Misguided policies such as Structural Adjustment Plan, SAP, development policies, nationalizing enterprises, and precondition loans. In fact, across the continent, the recipients of this aid are not better off as a result of it, but worse, much worse. Why? In Dead Aid, Dambisa Moyo describes the state of post-war development policy in Africa today and unflinchingly confronts one of the greatest myths of our time. Billions of dollars in aid sent from wealthy countries to develop African nations has helped to reduce poverty and increase growth. In fact, poverty levels continue to escalate and growth rates have steadily declined and millions continue to suffer, provocatively drawing a sharp contrast between African countries that have rejected the aid route and prospered as a result. On the contrary, others became aid-dependent and seen poverty increase. Dr. Moyo illuminates the way in which over-reliance on aid has trapped developing nations in a vicious cycle of aid dependency, corruption, market distortion, and further poverty, leaving them with nothing but the need for more aid. Graham Bruce Hancock, who is a British author and journalist, on his book entitled Lords of Poverty, said, "Bondage is the state of being bound by or subjected to some external power or control. When people are bound by debt, they are in debt bondage. When they are held in involuntary servitude, they are in bondage slavery. Before much of Africa became independent in the 1960s, Africans were held under the yoke of colonial bondage. International aid addiction has transformed Africa's colonial bondage into colonial bond aid. He asks, could it be reasonably argued that Africans are sinking deeper and deeper into a quicksand of bond aid, to coin a new word, in the second decade of the 21st century? Graham Hancock scrutinized the international aid industry, including UN agencies, USAID, the World Bank, IMF, and other multinational corporations. His withering criticism infuriated many in the international aid bureaucracies. But his incisive analysis could not be easily dismissed. His basic argument is that international aid has financed the creation of monstrous projects that, at a vast expense, have devastated the environment and ruined lives. It has supported and legitimized brutal tyrannies. It has facilitated the emergence of fantastical and Byzantine bureaucracies staffed by legions of self-serving hypocrites. It is a waste of money and time, and harmful to poor recipient countries, worth $60 billion in 1989. It is possibly the most formidable obstacle to the productive endeavors of the poor. It is also a denial of their potential and a patronizing insult to their unique and recognized abilities. The key point isn't narrating the extent to which aid killed African nations, rather what they can find their way out to lift billions of citizens out of dependence of aid. Why African nations aren't striving to address their burning question of food security issues? Few African countries are on the way to success. Among East African countries, Ethiopia is at the forefront in registering tangible progress on this area, heavily working to address the issue of food self-sufficiency and its effort gearing Food for Africa. Despite complications, Africa has unlimited potential to unleash development and make its future better and bright. For a testimony to this argument, African Development Bank President Akinwumi Adesina, while addressing G7 ministerial meeting, said, quote-unquote, amid a looming food crisis, Ethiopia has emerged as an African country that has taken significant steps to achieve self-sufficiency in food production. The president underlined that with support from the African Development Bank's Agricultural Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation Program, Ethiopia has not imported grain in 2022. Ethiopia's homegrown reform, especially in the agriculture sector, is a model for other African nations to become food self-sufficient and free from aid dependence. And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up this segment of ETV World. Make sure to follow and subscribe to our social media pages for more captivating content that circle on national, continental, and international issues. Goodbye for now.